start a digital painting coloring page, I just Googled a coloring page that I thought I would be interested in, and I found this butterfly flower coloring page. I'm just going to make sure you click on the thumbnail to get the larger image. If you just drag the thumbnail into Photoshop, it will open up a very small version of that image, as you can see here. It will not be high quality. If I drag this much larger image, I'm going to get a much bigger and higher quality image. Now I want to start out by looking at my layers. Right now, everything is on this one locked background layer, and I want to separate the white from my outline. So the first thing I'm going to do is unlock my background layer by just clicking this lock button. If this is not working, a solution might be to come up here to image, look at your mode, and if it is not RGB, change this to RGB and you will be able to unlock that layer. I have three selection tools right here. I'm going to go to this third selection tool, and if it is not on the magic wand tool, you can just click and hold to go select that magic wand tool. The magic wand tool selects everything of one color. So I'm going to select this white, and now I want to not only select the outside of this butterfly, but every piece of white. So I'm going to come up here to select and find similar. Now all of my white is selected, and I can just delete that white. On my keyboard, I will press Command D to deselect. You can also come up here to select, and deselect is right here, and we see that Command D for your hotkeys. Next, I want to add my white background back in. So I'm going to create a new layer down here. I have white in my foreground. If your foreground color does not show white, you can double click and go find your white. You can see your sample color right here and click OK. And now I'm going to come down to my paint bucket tool. This may say gradient tool. If it is on your gradient tool, just click and hold and grab your paint bucket tool, and we can dump the white into our artboard. Now we see my coloring page has disappeared. This is because of how my layers are ordered. I have my white layer on top of my outline layer. And while I'm here, I'm going to rename these. I'm going to rename this BG for background. And by double clicking on the words, I can just name this one outline. And I'm just going to click and drag my outline up on top till I see that blue line above my background layer and drop that there to bring my outline back in front of my background layer. Now I could go get my paintbrush tool. I'm going to either look at my color up here, or I can double click my foreground color down here and pick a color that I want to paint. Maybe I want to start with this flower in this nice burnt orange mustard color. I could use all of your settings for your paintbrush are up here. Yours will probably be set to just a regular general brush like this. To tell you about some settings, your size, of course, makes your brush bigger or smaller. Your hardness, right now I have it at 0. It makes this very soft, fuzzy edge. If I turned my hardness all the way up, you're going to get a much harder edge. And your opacity is over here at 100%. We see this is not see-through at all. At a little lower opacity, our brush starts to be see-through, and we can even see where these lines overlap each other. You can see a little bit darker orange. To undo these actions, I'm just pressing Command Z. You can see that up in here. Edit, undo. If you go too far with your undo. If you press Command Z, I'll show you what this looks like. If I press Command Z too many times, I can always go, we have a redo, Command Shift Z. That will bring it back. So I could start going in here and really carefully trying to paint in each one of these shapes. What we see here, firstly, my orange or my yellow is covering up my black outline. I'm also seeing it's really hard for me to stay in the outlines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and create a new layer. I'm going to double click this one. This is for my color. And I'm going to drag this color down underneath my outline. So now my color will go beneath my black. You will not see that color. If I drag this back on top, you can see my colors on top of my black outline. Now I'm still having a hard time staying inside the lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my magic wand tool and I'm going to start going back and forth between my outline layer and my color layer. So I can come get this magic wand tool and make this selection, and we can see I'm not on my outline layer, so it does not recognize the selection of this petal. I need to go back to my outline layer. Now once I go back to my outline layer, it will recognize that the edges of this shape, and it will make a selection right in there. This is where I want to remember not to color on my outline layer. I am notorious for coloring on the wrong layer, so I'm going to lock this layer so that when I go get my paintbrush, it won't let me paint on that layer. I want to only be painting on my color layer. And now it will only let me paint inside that shape. And because my opacity is down at 48, and I want to turn my hardness down so I can get some good shading, I can come add some nice gradient shading in here. Now to do that, you need to, I'm going to click my finger on my mouse and not take my finger up. The first time, I'm going to take my, and you can see if I try to keep coloring this while I'm clicked, it is not going to create more brush strokes on top of brush strokes I've already made. I need to take my finger off my mouse and then click down again to create these darker brush strokes. Now to make the selection of my next petal, I need to go back to my outline layer and I'm going to select my next petal. Selected two because you can see there's a gap right there, so that was all one shape. Now let's say I did not want to go back and forth and paint all of these petals one by one. But I also can't select multiple shapes at once. You have some settings up here. You can change this to add to selection instead of just new selection. So if I add to selection, I can add multiple shapes. I can go back to my paintbrush, go back to my color layer, and paint multiple shapes at once. I'm going to do my shading. And now I have this nice vibrant flower in the middle. I will press, now if I wanted to say paint these secondary petals a different color, I'm still on my multiple selection tool, so it's just going to keep adding selections. Once I go back to my outline layer to make that selection, I need to press Command D to deselect and start a new group of selections. Let's say I added one by accident I did not want to add. You can also subtract a selection, and I can go in and take that one back out. And then get my paintbrush. Got some different ways to select color up here. I like this one. Maybe I want this one to be a red. These are analogous colors because they are next to each other on the color wheel. And I can paint these petals in red. And again, I'm going to come back and do my shading. Eventually, you will finish a whole coloring page. And it may look something like this is when I have finished. At the end, it is your choice to take away your original coloring page. This makes a really cool watercolor effect. I will warn you that when I first took my coloring page away, I was left with no antennas because that was part of the black. So to add my antennas back in, I got my magic wand selection tool. I went to my outline layer and I selected the black. So now I can paint inside the black with a black color. And I just made sure to be very careful not to paint on the black parts that I didn't want. So I'm not going to paint down here. I'm only going to paint on the parts of the antennas that I do want. So now when I take my outline away, I'm left with some antennas. Once you have finished your painting, you will go to File, Save As, make sure to save to your cloud documents so that you can access your project on any computer, regardless of what computer you worked on previously. Make sure your name is in your project and the project name. So mine would be Ganzer.digital painting. I will click Save.